This morning in our Sunday Spotlight, we're learning about the connection between drinking alcohol and developing dementia. There is a correlation, according to a recently released study on the topic. The lead researcher on that study is Dr. Joel Gelernter. He's a Foundations Fund professor of psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine. Dr. Gelernter also does work at the VA Health Center in West Haven. Thank you for being with us. I think a lot of our viewers probably have had some type of dementia diagnosis affect them or their families or an elderly relative. And so people will be watching this carefully. Tell me about the study and what it was you set out to find.
Yeah, so relationship of heavy use of alcohol with dementia risk has been known for a long time. But for the past little more than 2 decades, there's been some controversy about the effect of drinking lower amounts of alcohol. So there was a study that came out a little more than 20 years ago that reported that there is what was called a J-shaped curve describing the relationship of dementia risk with alcohol intake. So if you picture the J, the hook of the J is at no drinking, and then the bottom is at a low level of drinking, like roughly 1 drink a day. And then you get the upward slope of the J, where risk of dementia goes up with high level of drinking. So according to that conception, if you don't drink at all, you have a certain risk of dementia. If you drink a bit, the risk goes down. And then if you drink more, the risk goes up pretty much monotonically. So when that paper came out, it made a pretty big impact because a lot of us thought that based on these data, the way to minimize dementia risk was not to be a teetotaler, but to drink a small amount. And that actually affected people's behavior because we all want to minimize our dementia risk. And if that meant that we should have a martini every day, this is something that a lot of us could live with.
I've actually been taking that advice, so I'm interested to see exactly what you found out. And I know one of the things in your world of doing this kind of research is you have to have a big amount of data, a big sample size. So you did that, 500,000 people, right? So tell me how you put this together and what you found.
Well, we had big samples and we looked at the data in different ways. First, we did a study of phenotypes and we looked at the data set. We used the Million Veteran Program and the UK Biobank, which are 2 large data sets that a lot of researchers use to answer mostly genetics questions. And we looked in those data sets directly at the relationship between drinking and risk of different kinds of dementia. And in that part of the study, we reproduced the earlier findings and we showed that the lowest risk for dementia traits was not with 0 drinking, it was with drinking a little bit. We also did a genomic study, and with that study, we used a design called Mendelian randomization, where we used genetic risk to predict drinking. And we found when we used genetic risk to predict drinking, which is actually a less biased way to design the study, we then found a monotonically increasing risk for dementia with alcohol intake. So the lowest risk of dementia was with 0 alcohol intake. And then the higher the genetically predicted alcohol intake, the higher the dementia risk. So the less biased genetic study differed in its results from the phenotypic study, which reproduced earlier results. So how do we explain this? Well, there are a couple of ways, and so I can focus on 2 main ways. First of all, when you do a phenotypic study and you find out if someone is a teetotaler or not, you usually find out if they're a teetotaler now, if they're a current drinker. Well, many people are teetotalers because they had problems with alcohol in the past. So they're drinking because they were advised by their doctors to stop drinking or to cut back, or because they had medical problems due to alcohol use, like cirrhosis or other medical problems. So they're teetotalers not because they've never wanted to drink, but because they have past histories of consuming large quantities of alcohol.
So that would be when you said the J curve, that's the high part on the J, people who we thought, oh, well, they just reported they don't drink, but maybe they used to. And so those answers aren't reliable, right?
Well, they may be reliable because it's true that they don't drink now. But if you consider together their lifetime alcohol intake, that they're not the ones with the lowest lifetime alcohol intake taken overall.
Right.
And that's actually been tested directly in other phenotypic studies. If you look only at teetotalers, lifetime non-drinkers, they do have the lowest dementia risk.
So what's the
But
takeaway from this then, doctor? If people are watching this and saying, okay, we're getting ready to head into the holiday season, everyone's going to be holding out that glass of wine or that champagne toast. None of it's safe. How should do we have any way to say what our viewers should do to maybe lower their risk? Just don't drink?
well, there are a few ways to look at it. There was a bit of a Twitter response to our paper, and some people reasonably pointed out that the risk of dementia from drinking small amounts of alcohol is small. Okay, so you can use that data in different ways. If you want to minimize your risk of dementia, then you probably shouldn't drink at all. But if you drink a little, your risk is not high. And a lot of us do things in life that have some degree of risk knowingly, it's just that you should know what the risk is. We view the more important outcome as showing that drinking a small amount is not extra good for you in preventing dementia. So previously, we might have advised medically, previously 10, 15 years ago, that if you want to minimize your dementia risk, you should drink a bit. And we now know that that's not the case. If you really want to minimize your dementia risk with respect to alcohol, then the best way to do that is not to drink at all. And drinking a little may not be terribly harmful. It's a little harmful. It's not the best thing you can do.
All right. Well, it's
And we used to
certainly,
think it was the best thing you could do.
well, that advice is much less fun, doctor, but we appreciate that you were able to get to the bottom of it. As you said, I'm sure there's been a lot of Twitter jokes about it, but we appreciate you coming on here and breaking it all down for us. Like I said, many of our viewers, I'm sure, have been interested to hear it. Thank you for joining us here on CT25.
Pleasure. Thank you.
That is CT25 for this week. CBS Sunday Morning is coming up next. Have a great rest of your weekend. And before we see you again, a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll meet you back here in Studio A next Sunday morning.